Hi, I'm Brian Gardner, and welcome to Speedball's how-to series on screen printing. Today we're going to talk about 3 methods of getting your artwork on the screen, and coincidentally, Speedball has different kits for each method that we're going to talk about. One is a cut paper stencil. The second is using drawing fluid directly on the screen, and the third method is using a transparency to get your image on there so we can transfer it to the screen. So the first method we're going to talk about is the cut paper stencil. And in this kit, there's a packet of 50 sheets of Graphics 360 marker paper, which is perfect. You can actually get up to 50 impressions per cut. The only downfall of this is that you're going to get really basic stencil cutting, whereas that you're actually not going to get a lot of detail because of the method of cutting. So this is my design that I'm going to cut out, and you can see that this is one that I've done before. So there's an open area here that the actual ink is going to pass through on this cut stencil. So whenever you're cutting a stencil, make sure that you do have some sort of protecting pad underneath a very sharp X-Acto knife or some kind of razor tool that you could actually cut out your art with. And understanding you're not going to be able to get a lot of detail from it, but it makes really incredibly crisp printed images. What we're going to do is adhere this to the screen. That's going to enable us to pull the squeegee and get our image to our substrate, whether it be paper or a t-shirt or fabric. Your screen has 2 sides to it. It has a substrate side and it has a inkwell side. So it's very important to understand that you have to put your cut stencil on the substrate side of the screen, because eventually we're going to be pulling a squeegee on the other side, and you don't want to tear your paper or your stencil. So right now I need to make sure that I have this flipped the correct way. So this is the way that I want my image to look. So I want to make sure that I flip it on the back of the screen, and what I'm going to do is simply tape that image to the back of the screen. And I'm going to very carefully cut the tape, and I don't want to score through this screen, so be very careful with sharp blades if you're cutting. So you can see the basic setup right here starting to take form. My cut paper stencil is on the substrate side of the screen, and what I'm going to do is actually tape the interior of the inkwell side of the screen. And that means there's a small gap between the screen and the edge of your frame. And sometimes ink can actually drip down through that screen and unwantingly get on your paper or your t-shirt or fabric, whatever you're printing. And you can see I'm just taking an 1.5 or 2-inch piece of painter's tape, and I'm laying it inside the screen so it touches both the frame and the screen. And then I'm just very gently rubbing my fingers here and making a nice little border here that is gonna keep the ink from getting where I don't want it to get. And so I'm just kind of pressing this and making sure the edges of the interior of the screen are completely covered. Now the only thing showing through is my cut paper stencil, and that is going to be on the substrate side. So when I do pull this squeegee on a piece of paper, you're going to see that it only goes through where I have cut out my artwork. So now I'm going to use Speedball's fabric ink. This actually can be used on paper and fabric, but don't forget that you cannot use acrylic on fabric. It will wash out in the wash, but that's not true with paper. We can actually use the fabric ink to print on paper. And right now I'm actually going to put a bead of ink down here and try to be as clean as possible. And it'll make the process go a little easier for you, and you won't have a complete mess on your fingers and all that stuff in your surrounding area. So the ink bead was actually put on the interior of the screen in the inkwell. And I did not lay it down so it's directly on my stencil. I want it off to the edge. And you're gonna grab your plastic squeegee. There are two edges to this squeegee. There's a sharp side and a little bit more rounded side. And there's labels here for either paper or fabric. And we're gonna use the graphic side. So right now, I'm simply going to take this squeegee and I'm gonna pull it relatively moderate speed. I don't want to go too slow and I don't want to go too quickly. So if you go too slow, you're going to pull a lot of ink at one time, and because of the speed, you might be getting too much ink underneath that stencil and not get a nice crisp line. By contrast, if I pull it too quickly, I might not get enough ink through to print on the substrate. So I'm going to put a couple pounds of pressure on this, and I'm going to take it across the screen to print my image. I'm going to lift it up off the substrate, the paper or the t-shirt, and then you want to give it a flood stroke, meaning that you want to take the ink back over to the side in which you pulled from first. That's going to flood the screen to keep it from drying until you put your next piece of paper down. So you can see right now, the ink only went through where there was an opening in the cut stencil. And you can see the back of the screen, the paper has wrinkled just a little bit, which is perfectly fine. As long as we keep that nice crisp edge during the printing process, we're good. Sometimes you might wanna kind of get your finger and sort of get these little creases out so they don't interfere with the next pull. But you know, this paper should last maybe 40 to 50 impressions. You should be good. If during printing you do run out of ink, just simply put another bead down, and yeah, just keep it replenished.
Thanks for watching.